All right, and welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the season finale of season 2 of Star Trek Valhalla, a Star Trek Adventurers actual play run by myself. And today, six really cool people that I consider my friends. Well, I should say five plus Aaron, but I digress. But without further ado, we're actually going to go around the table. You will notice that we do have a special guest here today. One Aaron, who, if you're a viewer, subscriber, watcher of the channel, you'll recognize him from a couple of Pathfinder games and MechWarrior Destiny as well, which should be back here hopefully in January or February. And he's a pretty cool dude, but he'll be playing a special character today during the potential court martial of one Captain Traso, played by Mr. Brian. But without further ado, we're going to go around the table, have everyone introduce themselves. We're going to go Symbol, Brian, Aaron, Drew Baca, Sidereal Day, and Charles Warren. Take it away, friends.
Hello, everyone. I am Symbol, or Symbol24 here on Twitch, and I play Lieutenant Alden Paris, the science officer of the Ragnar and member of the Great Paris family. Hopefully, here to support my captain and totally not tank his defense.
I'm not getting a lot of faith out of that. I'm Brian. I'm at MindOverBrian on both Twitter and on Twitch, although on Twitch I spell it with a 0. And I'm playing Captain Asba Traso, the Betazoid captain who has foregone his telepathic gifts, who is apparently on trial for just doing his job.
And I'm Aaron. I'm just here for this one, probably because after this, I'm worried that Brian's not going to be my friend anymore, and that hurts my feelings a little bit to think about it. But such is the burden entrusted to me by this wonderful GM. Well, it's an okay GM. And I'm going to be playing Lieutenant Commander Shruth, an Andorian member of the Starfleet Office of the Judge Advocate General. And I'm court-martialing the captain, not for doing his job, but for doing a bad job.
Drew Baca, you're up next.
I'm Drew Baca. I am playing Lieutenant Commander Krev, the Tellarite Chief Engineer of the Ragnar, and the Defense Council for the captain. And I'm going to exonerate him of these heinous allegations, and I might end up having to transport some people into space.
Make note that the defense counselor is threatening the courtroom. Noted. Sidereal Day.
It's not a threat yet.
Never says it out loud.
I'm Sidereal Day, and I play the Bajoran Commander Ajay Shahira, who is First Officer and Chief Medical Officer, although right now I am unfortunately acting Commander of the USS Ragnar. I'm very much hoping to hand that back to Captain Traso after tonight.
Hey, I'm Charles. I play Ensign Zed, the Ferengi Chief of Security and Operations Officer aboard the Ragnar. And also, I learned last time that I might be the unofficial morale officer. We'll see about that.
It's official. It's not unofficial. It's official for sure. And of course, I am Darewolf, the Game Master. However, today, I shall be taking on the role of Admiral Anton. He is the Chief Admiral, the Admiral in charge of Starbase 123, as well as the fleet that operates inside and outside of that starbase and the surrounding smaller starbases. We're going to start actually with an opening log very briefly from Admiral Anton, and then I'm going to do a brief intro to the courtroom, and then we're really going to get started with this court-martial. And I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go, but I have faith. I have faith in both our counselors to find the truth, as it were.
Do you have faith of the heart?
I do have faith of the heart.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you. Admiral Anton, Stardate 4095443.65. I begin this log with a bit of trepidation. It is not often that an admiral has to question the leadership of one of the captains underneath him. But after reading the log, both the personal logs as well as the ship's recordings of those events, I find myself questioning a captain who I thought more of. Computer, erase that last part. The relations between the Klingons and the Federation have continued to degrade. I've been spending much of my time with Admiral Janeway as well as Admiral Picard discussing possible diplomatic solutions to the increasing tensions. As of now, though, both myself and the rest of Starfleet Command believe that, unfortunately, war is inevitable. However, today I am not spending my time thinking about this impending war. Instead, I will be in charge of determining the fate of a captain of the Federation. Looking at the notes, looking at the logs, and reading, I question whether or not I may have done the same thing he did. But in this situation, it is not a question of what I would have done, but what should have been done. End log. And you may have 25 threat, Game Master, for that delightful opening log. Well done. Thank you so much. Game Master, I appreciate you. Very good. We're going to open our scene. As the lights come up, we find ourselves in a brightly lit Federation courtroom aboard Starbase 123. Sitting on the right-hand side of the courtroom is a blue Andorian. He wears an expression of... How does he look, Aaron?
Neutral.
With a neutral expression. A few papers, a datapad or two sitting on the table in front of him. On the other side, opposite him, we see one Captain Traso and one Lieutenant Commander Krev. Krev wearing an expression of... How does he look, Drubaka?
It's not a pleasant expression. He looks really pissed off.
And we also see next to him Captain Traso wearing an expression of...
Determined resignation.
Very good. Sitting up at the front of this courtroom, we see Admiral Anton. We see a number of his staff sitting next to him. There appears to be an Andorian, a human, and then also a Cardassian sitting with him, which is interesting. However, as he brings his gavel up, I don't need to tell all of you why we are here. It is to determine whether or not the actions of Captain Traso were warranted or not. Did he uphold the beliefs of the Federation? Did he uphold the credences of the Federation? I intend to find the truth here with you all today. Counselors, would you both please approach the bench? As the two counselors approach the bench and come up, Captain Anton, or Admiral Anton, has an expression of almost concern. He actually leans in towards Lieutenant Commander Krev. Lieutenant Commander Krev, I have offered to you twice now, and I give you one last chance to step down as the defendant for your captain. It is in my professional and personal opinion that you are too close to this case to offer a unbiased opinion. But if you choose to proceed, I will listen to what you have to say without resignation.
Well, I've told you my thoughts on the matter several times in private. I will not have those words put on the record, mainly because I wish to keep what's left of my career. But I will defend the captain to the best of my abilities, and I feel that no one else could do it better. No one else knows him better.
He stares for an almost uncomfortable amount of time at Lieutenant Commander Krev, as though he is trying to gauge the man in some way. His gaze then drifts over to Lieutenant Commander Sharath? Shruth, I said it right the first time. Shruth. Are you ready, Counselor?
I am, Admiral, and I'd like to say that the loyalty of the captain's chief engineer is commendable, and the prosecution has noted it.
Gentlemen, my goal here today, if I'm allowed to have one, is to find the truth of these happenings, regardless of personal biases, and he looks directly at Lieutenant Commander Krev when he says that. Is that understood, gentlemen?
Sir.
Yes, sir. And may I address the counsel for the defense briefly?
Proceed.
Lieutenant Commander Krev, I'm truly sorry that it's come to this. And I hope that as a fellow belligerent, you'll not take any of this personally.
Good luck. Rev turns
And-
around and walks away.
The Admiral leans back as Lieutenant Commander Krev walks away. You mentioned you like him. You see a small smirk on the Admiral's face as you mentioned that. As the prosecution, Lieutenant Commander Shruth, you have the opening statement. You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. Admiral, members of the court, fellow officers, we are here today to discuss a very serious accusation that Captain Traso on Stardate 408566.3 flagrantly and wantonly disregarded not only the procedures but the principles of Starfleet. In a noble goal, the preservation of his ship, the chief concern of any captain. I have no doubt that the captain's intentions were good. And I have no doubt that he is a good man. But good intentions and a good heart are not enough. One must have the resolve to be a good man while doing what must be done. If you stand in the ashes of a dead world and ask the ghosts if good intentions matter, their silence will be your answer. It is my intention to prove today that Captain Traso, by action or omission of action, was derelict in his duty and negligent in the execution of his mission and the command of his vessel. And we ask for the strongest possible consequence: expulsion from Starfleet.
And as Lieutenant Commander Shruth ends his opening statement, you see both the Admiral as well as those joining him at the judges' seats, his council itself. You see them taking notes, nodding. You see a couple of them whispering, and Admiral Anton seems to be ignoring them and simply just looking at the two counselors and Captain Traso. I'd like to, though, take a moment before we hear the opening statement from Lieutenant Commander Krev to just zoom back to where, in a very small, concise audience, we see Commander Ajay Ensign Zed, and Lieutenant Paris. Lieutenant Paris, you are sitting on the left-hand side of the courtroom. As we pan towards your face, what is the expression that you wear?
Lieutenant Paris is extremely nervous. He's fidgeting, he's tapping his foot, and probably a lot of people noticed that when the words of expulsion were said, he kind of like leaned forward and was about to get up from his seat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We then pan over to Ensign Zed, sort of skipping past Ajay for the time being. But Ensign Zed, what is the expression on your face? What color are your ears right now?
A brighter orange than normal.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of sitting forward in his seat, but also kind of leaned over towards Commander Ajay, and he continuously is whispering questions to her,
Mm-hmm.
like what does that mean? Does that mean he's gonna, or just like kind of a running commentary?
Mm-hmm.
He looks very worried about what might happen to the captain.
And as he's leaning over and we see him whispering something, this inaudible question to Commander Ajay, what is the expression on Commander Ajay's face?
Commander Ajay is drawing on her early time with the Bajoran religious order, and she is keeping her face as expressionless as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Every so often, she'll murmur a response to Zed if he pauses long enough to let her, but otherwise, she's keeping her eyes pretty straightforward.
Okay, so just keeping things straightforward, looking poised in this situation. The Admiral motions towards Lieutenant Commander Krev. Defense Counselor, your opening statement.
Krev stands up, kind of cracks his neck a little bit, looks around the courtroom, and ladies and gentlemen of the court, we are here to dispute the charges laid against Captain Traso. We feel that the captain's actions were taken with the highest standards, within the highest standards of Starfleet and the Federation. He made a hard decision at a hard time, and these are not the kinds of decisions that can be made in damn it. I'm losing my train here. Hold on a second. He made these decisions within the highest traditions of Starfleet, defending his crew and saving the lives of the population of the planet killer.
At the mention of saving the population, Lieutenant Commander Krev, you notice Admiral Anton's eyebrows kind of raise up, and you see him nod his head ever so slightly in your direction, but it's very, very brief, and then he goes back to seeming very neutral about the whole situation.
This entity was responsible for the devastation of. Do we have an actual number of number of planets we think this thing has destroyed?
It was unknown.
Of uncounted planets, and its next destination was here in the Federation. It was looking for Earth. It was looking for all of our home planets. Captain Traso did what he had to do to protect the Federation, Starfleet, his ship, and his crew. Thank you.
You see some murmurs back and forth between Admiral Anton and his aides by his sides. Very well. Since Lieutenant Commander Shruth, you are the prosecution, you may call the first witness.
Thank you, Admiral. The defense calls Ensign Zed. Or the prosecution calls it. I'm the prosecution, you're the defense. You know what I'm saying.
Ensign Zed, you are called forward to sit in the central chair. You are raised up on a platform a little bit higher so that you're actually sitting at eye level with Admiral Anton, who is staring at you intently. His expression is not one of... It doesn't feel mean, but it looks very intense. It is a disconcerting sort of stare. Maybe it causes you to feel a little bit uneasy, but you maintain your posture, you maintain your faculties in this moment. But please proceed.
Yes, Zed sits up very still and kind of has a nervous, almost smile on his face, revealing his jagged teeth, kind of like that.
Mhm.
And he can't help but keep staring and looking back at the admiral who's looking at him.
Mm-hmm.
Ensign,
Oh,
please
yes.
state your name and position aboard the USS Ragnar for the record.
Of course. I am Ensign Zed. I am the Chief of Operations and also the Chief of Security aboard the USS Ragnar.
Thank you. Now, in your own words, tell us exactly what happened during your first contact with a species referred to as the Tokal on Stardate 408566.3.
Well, well, we were informed that we were to receive some emissaries of the Tikal who were considering joining the Federation, and we made extensive preparations for their arrival. However, once they boarded the vessel, it seemed very clear that they were an unusual pair of ambassadors. One was completely interested only in material pleasures, food and decorations and the sort, while the female was interested only in, she was very Spartan and interested only in, I suppose, military questions, all of which we of course, avoided answering as clearly as possible. Shall I go on?
Please.
After a time, I was assigned Utu, the male, and I brought him to the holodeck where I had prepared a presentation that would educate them on Federation, an overview of the Federation and our values and what it means to be a member planet. He seemed quite disinterested, so I modified the program so that he was given a tour of Risa. And while on Risa, I pointed out the great diversity of species among the Federation. He became quite angry when he saw a Klingon. But I assured him, I didn't assure him. I actually told him that if he were to join the Federation, that he would have to accept all species unbiased, in an unbiased manner. After this exchange, his demeanor changed to a very serious one. And then he had question after question about where the Federation was and numbers and statistics and positions of planets and such.
Good. And let's skip ahead a little, Ensign, to when you first become aware of the entity.
Yes. Well, during the majority of this incident, I was trapped on the holodeck. But I'm told from the other security officers that a sort of a maw or mouth or aperture, as you will, opened up on this planet and threatened to draw the Ragnar in and consume it. As the security officer of the Ragnar, I can affirm this after reviewing the data that this entity was far more powerful than the Ragnar. The ship came very close to being consumed by this entity, and if I may add, I do see the wisdom in the captain's decision in terminating the entity. We had no indication that it would not be able to regain its power after it had been weakened by the temporal phenomenon that Lieutenant Paris created. He did evacuate all of the all of the children life forms before ultimately destroying the planet. I do think this was sound from a tactical standpoint.
And Ensign, by children, you mean the population of the planet, the Tokal?
Indeed. They were de-aged in a similar way that the planet was reverted to a past state, if you will.
I see. And
our Lieutenant Paris is quite brilliant.
yes, your crew has a reputation for, shall we say, colorful and unorthodox solutions to situations.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
I'm not sure that was a compliment, Ensign.
Oh.
However, allow me to ask, in your capacity as Chief of Security,
yes,
did the questions the Tokal ambassador that you were assigned to pose to you, locations, military structure, uh, perhaps deployments, current strength,
how our weapons technology worked?
is it at all possible, in your opinion, given the benefit of hindsight, that this was an attempt by the creature itself to glean intelligence regarding an area of space it wished to explore?
Um, if you mean explore for the purpose of eating planets, yes, I would agree with you. He, at least that is my assessment.
And this entity, in reviewing the logs, it was malicious. It was, to use a dramatic flourish, evil, in your opinion? Or is it possible that it was simply following its nature?
Well, I suppose it is the nature of all biological life forms to consume other biological matter in order to sustain itself. From that standpoint, yes, because during one point it stated that it hungered, I believe, and that it needed to know where these planets were, and then, of course it attacked myself and another security officer in the holodeck.
Yes. So
It seemed quite single-minded in its need for knowledge of these of the Federation.
indeed, and this ambassador was subdued.
Yes, the ambassador was subdued.
Lethally?
No, he was not lethally subdued.
Why?
Oh, well, I always make a point to try to. I always make a point to try to, as non-lethally as possible, subdue our adversaries in the hope that they may one day become our allies.
So the possibility that if given enough time, communication and understanding can win out over aggression and base desires,
Oh, yes, I believe firmly in that, Commander.
that one day enemies can become allies and even friends.
That is the Federation way.
Of course it is. My species was a founding member of the Federation. For centuries, we were at war with the Vulcan people, a war we believed would never end. But eventually, a species that we came to know as humans showed us that we had more in common than we thought. And over time, those seeds took root. And now, we sit together as members of the Federation and explore the stars hand in hand, as we do with Ferengi, as we do with, and he gestures at the Cardassian, the word Cardassians, as we do with, as we have done with, and I hope we'll continue to do with Klingons.
Exactly, Commander. It is these values of the Federation that inspired me to join Starfleet.
And tell me, Ensign, how are these values best reflected in Captain Traso's decision to neutralize this entity?
Oh well, I did. Well, I did not. I well, that is a very good question.
Let me rephrase that for you, Ensign. Do you believe that that decision was in line with the core principles of Starfleet and the Federation?
Ensign Zed turns really a bright orange, blushing kind of, and he looks very uncomfortable in his chair. He says, "With and he looks over with with kind of an apologetic look at the captain and over at Commander Ajay, and he looks back. He says, with all due respect, Commander, as Chief of Security, it's just my job to follow and support the orders of Captain."
Ensign, that is a yes or no question.
I do not think that it was the best
Objection!
Order! Order in my courtroom.
Ensign is not capable.
Order in my courtroom. Order.
Smacks a hand over Paris's mouth and shoves him back
Lieutenant
into his
Paris,
seat.
you will sit down and you will be quiet, or I'll have you removed from this courtroom.
Our apologies for the interruption, Admiral.
Counselor, you may proceed.
The lieutenant does bring up a good point, though. I would like to form an objection as well.
He motions.
And he looks back, and I'm allowed to. This is speculation, Admiral. The ensign is being asked to speculate the mental state of a captain of his ship. He can't speculate onto that, and it's not legal for him to give his opinion on that in this case.
Admiral, I respectfully disagree.
An interpretation, Crev. It's an interpretation.
Ensign Zed is the chief of security of the Ragnar, ultimately responsible for the safety of the crew, second only to the captain in that regard. I believe that he is uniquely qualified to answer this question.
The Admiral pauses for a moment, mulling over the two counselors' statements. Sustained. You may proceed, Lieutenant Commander Shruth. Ensign Zed, please answer the question in full.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Yes. Do you believe the captain's decision to neutralize this entity was in line with the core values of Starfleet and the Federation?
I, uh, perhaps not, Commander.
Thank you.
But there were extenuating circumstances.
And we will get to them, Ensign. I promise you. We will explore all the extenuating circumstances. It is unfortunate you spent most of this encounter trapped in the holodeck. However, your contributions have been noted, as is your loyalty to your captain. It is admirable. And I have no further questions, Admiral.
Defense Counselor, your witness.
Ensign,
Yes, Commander.
do you feel qualified to sit in judgment of the captain as you were asked?
I must say I do not.
Objection, Admiral. I did not ask the ensign to sit in judgment of the captain, merely give his estimation of the result of the captain's actions with Starfleet's values.
Quid
I
pro
asked
quo,
him-
Lieutenant Commander.
I asked him to pass no judgment, sir.
Overruled.
Perhaps I mistook.
Overruled. Lieutenant Commander Krev, please rephrase your question.
Do you feel qualified, or maybe qualified's the incorrect word? Do you feel that the depth and breadth of your experience in Starfleet qualifies you to I can't think of a word that works better than passes judgment, but come on, Drew. Qualifies you to second guess the actions of your captain, the man who trained you to be a chief of security.
Well, I would say that the captain is far more experienced than I am. I am only an ensign, and so I would always defer to his judgment in matters. Although I would bring up suggestions and possible disagreements to his attention to give him the opportunity to weigh things. But in answer to your question, I feel that the captain is far more experienced and knowledgeable and far more qualified to make decisions such as this than I am.
Thank you, Ensign Zed.
You're welcome, Commander Kraft.
I'm done with this witness, Admiral.
Very well, Ensign Zed. You may return to your seat.
Ensign Zed gets up and he kind of looks at the floor, and kind of ashamed a little bit, and he glances up towards Captain Traso with kind of an apologetic look, and then he returns to his seat.
Traso makes sure to give him like a what do I want? A comforting nod, like, no, you did great. You did great.
Mm. The Admiral talks with his advisors next to him. You hear some murmuring. You may call your next witness.
Of course, Admiral. Prosecution calls Lieutenant Paris.
No longer able to be held back by Commander Ajay.
Lieutenant
Yikes.
Paris. Lieutenant Paris stands up, tightens his shirt, and walks over to the seat.
Hello, Lieutenant. Please, for the record, state your name, rank, and position aboard the USS Ragnar.
Lieutenant Alden Paris, Chief Science Officer of the Ragnar.
Excellent. Lieutenant, describe for me your activities aboard the USS Ragnar prior to the entity's encounter on Stardate 408566.3. In examining the captain's logs, I found reference to a passion project.
Yes. As some of you may know, on the Ragnar was installed a chronoton-based cloaking device when we launched, and after our events within the other dimension, the system was not performing on the same level, nor was it equally effective. And I believe that I could upgrade the system within a new, more compact form with lower power requirements, and thus have an upgrade for the system that could be then prototyped properly.
And these modifications only serve to enhance the efficiency of a standard cloaking device. Is that correct?
They were a redesign of the chronoton-based cloaking device that was on the Ragnar, not a standard tachyon-based device. Thus, one of the flaws of the original system that we had was that it could interact with other quantum-based particles. So one of the upgrades that was performed was to enhance the balancing of chronoton particles.
Excellent. And in layman's terms, Lieutenant, I'm afraid I'm not much of an engineer or a scientist. What would be the effect of this modification in a real-world application?
In real-world application, this would render the cloak no longer detectable with tachyon or neutrino bursts, which the old system had, and would have the potential to become a virtually impenetrable shield for the scanners, if at one point. Although that
So
is,
a for lack of a better term, perfect cloak.
that was in 50 or so years, yes.
That's an admirable goal, Lieutenant. Admirable. Is it possible for this cloaking device to have unforeseen temporal consequences to its use?
As the original design also had the same problem, it is one of the key things that I was trying to fix with the gamma ray bursts that were introduced into the chronoton particles. Those should have stabilized with other quantum particles. The unforeseen consequence was a graviton burst that caused a siphoning of the particles into the ship.
Understood. And during the encounter with the entity, how was it accomplished that you reverted it to a nascent state?
To be totally frank, sir, I'm not 100% sure. The effect of the graviton stream pulling all the chronotons into the maw of the ship seemed to have caused the ship to somehow revert in its own timeline, but not spatially. That is why it shrunk in size. That is why the all the life forms attached to the ship were also de-aged.
The Cardassian who's sitting to the left of Admiral Anton actually pipes up. Lieutenant Paris, just to be clear, by ship you mean the entity itself, not the Ragnar.
Exactly, sorry.
He nods his head.
And the projection of this graviton beam into the maw of this entity, what was the desired effect?
There was not supposed to be any pulling of chronotons into the maw. That was an unintended side effect.
An unintended side effect of the cloak's activation?
Yes. And the interaction between the chronotons and the entity.
So the activation of the cloak was meant to mask you from this organism and spare you from the ultimate fate that it had planned for you, correct?
Exactly. The use of our own tractor beam as a repulsor was intended to move us out of the way of the graviton maw, and the cloaking device was intended to then shield us temporarily, at least until we could regroup.
A follow-up question then, Lieutenant. Why not simply bring the ship about and engage warp drive?
At that time, unbeknownst to me, the warp drives were offline. I had heard just rumors at that point.
I understand. So the primary means by which you could escape was rendered inoperable, accidentally or intentionally?
Intentionally, in the sense that Lieutenant Krev did deem his retrofit necessary.
Understood. Understood. And what attempts, Lieutenant, were made to communicate with the entity?
Up to that point, the entity had not been known to be an entity, only that it was a planet. Thus, the only communication we ever had up to that point were with the two on board on board the Ragnar.
Right, and one of whom was trapped on the holodeck with Ensign Zed and attacked him. Where was the other?
I believe she was with Commander Ajay in the medical bay, I believe.
I understand. Very good. Was a subspace transmission to the planet ever attempted to establish communications, or were the Takev ever contacted from the Ragnar to ask just what the devil was going on with their planet?
On multiple occasions.
Understood, and you got no response.
Exactly.
So standard forms of communication proved ineffectual.
Up to that point, yes.
Understood. Understood. Thank you, Lieutenant. That will be all.
Lieutenant Commander Krev, your witness.
Sorry, I couldn't find the screen that I had my mute button on. Lieutenant Paris. Would you say that part of your abilities and part of your ability to think on your feet and be the officer that you are today that allowed you to design this rather impressive, if I do say so myself, Lieutenant, new cloaking device? Would you say a lot of this was helped by the mentorship of the captain?
None of this would have been possible. None of that would have been possible without the captain. He's the one that both steered me in a better direction and both helped me understand where the limits are.
Where the limits are? You mean the limits imposed by Starfleet? Would you say that he's instilled in you a respect for the traditions and goals of Starfleet and the Federation?
With a name like Paris, there are a lot of expectations, ones that I used to flaunt around a lot, thanks to the mentorship and friendship of the captain. That has improved a lot. It is not perfect, but I don't think any other captain I would have been under would have been able to find the right line with me.
Thank you, Lieutenant. You may go.
He visibly sags, and then they're like, "Oh no, shit!" Perks up and then goes back to sit down. It's like, and then just like starts sweating profusely.
So at this point, we do a little bit of a montage where Lieutenant Commander Sleuth calls up a couple of other lower officers. We have some back and forth between Lieutenant Commander Karev and him. Just different officers asking about the character of the captain, back and forth, back and forth. And then after about an hour of proceedings, the Admiral rises up and says, "I think a recess is in order before we continue. We'll take 15 minutes, meet back here, and continue. Everyone is dismissed for the time being." I want to give the crew of the Ragnar and the captain just a brief couple of moments to maybe gather together and just talk with one another. I just want to see what's on their mind during these proceedings. And so I leave the scenes to you as the Admiral steps away, goes to take a breather. Lieutenant Commander Sleuth, are you just sitting at your desk? Do you step out? Yeah, he's just sitting there.
Nope, he's just sitting there. You'll see him like tapping on a pad, and it seems like he's making notes.
Yep. And so I leave it to all of you as you can approach the captain and talk with him and Lieutenant Commander Karev for a few moments.
I'm sorry, Karev. I'm so sorry.
Just, you did fine, boy. Just keep your bloody mouth shut in the gallery.
I'm sorry. It's just that poor Zed. He's like, he's being like.
Zed is too pure for all of us. And there is no way that he could not have been led astray. Zed, I don't hold it against you.
Also,
Understand.
Maybe a little, but
Should I have objected during Lieutenant Paris's testimony?
No,
No.
no.
Oh,
No,
That,
Ensign.
that was wrong of me,
said
and
no.
it did not help the captain's case.
I think it's very important that you all know that regardless of how this turns out, you've all served admirably. And if for some reason I cannot resume my command, it won't be because of a failure on any of your parts. Are we understood?
Understood, Captain. But there must be something that we can do.
Yes,
we
we can
can-
present the facts and allow them to speak for themselves, which you have already done a good job of, Ensign.
Trust the process.
The captain does like a quick double take. Yes.
God, if the admiral had only been here for that, he would have acquitted you on the spot.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Beautiful, beautiful. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share between one another?
I have a question, Commander Krev.
Ensign,
As the chief engineer, undoubtedly, your insight into this would be very valuable. Will you take the witness stand? And if so, who will question you?
Not if we want the captain to keep his seat.
Look at Aaron's face. Look at it.
Ensign,
Don't worry about it.
Ensign, I am a grumpy old bastard, and I would do nothing but insult and snark back at whoever questioned me. And nothing I have to say would do anything to help our case. Besides, I didn't even know anything was going on until well after the fact.
And as Lieutenant Commander Krev ends that, I'd like just a moment as the rest of the crew kind of steps away. Just a moment between the first officer and her captain. I was curious if they have any words or expressions to share. Brian's camera has died, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. He's back.
Hey,
I don't know what happened.
Mhm. Like you said, Captain, it'll all turn out, right?
Turn out the way it's supposed to. I mean, worst comes to worst, I transport out of here and steal a runabout, right?
That sounds like one of Lieutenant Commander Krev's plans, sir.
Oh, where do you think I got this comm badge?
Well, I guess things can't be too grim then.
Oh, I mean, we'll see. But I have faith. In the process, not of the heart. I don't know what these people keep talking about.
All
And
right,
like I told the ensign, you get up there, you tell the truth.
I know.
All right. I'll
I'd
see
like-
you up there.
Yes, I suspect you will.
All rise. Everyone rises. The Admiral and his staff come back in, take their seats, sit back down. You may all be seated. Prosecution. Next witness.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. For my next witness, I call Lieutenant Commander Krev.
talk.
And Commander Krev, approach the bench.
For the sake of brevity, Lieutenant Commander, you may continue to object to any of my questions, as you are still the defense counsel.
Oh, I will.
Please, in the interest of the record, state your name, rank, and position aboard the USS Ragnar.
My name is Lieutenant Commander Krev Glosh. I am the chief engineer of the Ragnar.
Excellent. And On Stardate 408566.3, what were you doing as chief engineer of the Ragnar?
I was doing a overhaul of the Ragnar's magnetic compression coils
To what end?
to improve and replace the current coils, the coils that were previously installed on the ship, with a improved design of my own making.
Ah, so prototyping non-standard technology.
In the finest tradition of Starfleet engineering, yes.
Granted, Lieutenant Commander, but outside of Federation space, in the Shackleton expanse, if I'm not mistaken, with the threat of Klingon attack looming ever closer, were these overhauls immediately necessary to the function of the USS Ragnar?
No, sir.
Was the captain aware of this overhaul from the start?
He was aware I was going to do work. He was not aware of the nature of the work.
So, foreknowledge of the fact that you were about to take the Ragnar's warp engines offline for an indeterminate period of time may have had an impact on the mission.
Negative. He knew that the warp core would be, that the warp engines would be offline for a short period of time.
Very good. And still, he signed off on this.
Correct.
Can you explain to me, Lieutenant Commander, why he felt it necessary to send a crewman down to check up on you in engineering and present you with his things I don't want to happen list?
It is it's a throwback, Lieutenant Commander, to when he was an ensign in my engine room on his first assignment.
So he served under you early in his
Correct.
career. And now you serve under him.
Correct.
Very good. Very good. When the events surrounding the entity began, what was the status of the warp engines?
Let's see. That was, well, define the events concerning the entity. Do you mean
When it became
when-
clear the ship was in immediate and imminent danger, what was the status of the refit?
status of the refit was I had finished the lower coils and I had one out of the 3 upper coils remaining to install.
So warp drive was still inoperable.
Affirmative.
At what point did you become aware that there was an immediate, imminent danger to the ship?
I'd say shortly after that, I was contacted in engineering by the captain.
Define shortly after that. In more specific terms, please.
It was, I don't have a timeline for it. I was hanging upside down from a sling, welding crystals together. I was not paying attention to the chronometer.
I see. I see. Was there a red alert ordered?
Was there a red alert? Or I don't remember. No. No, we did not. I do not remember a red alert.
So there was a yellow alert.
I do not believe any alert was called.
So the ship was at condition green while in immediate and imminent danger.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was yellow alert.
Ah.
We were at yellow alert. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
The Andorian that's sitting to the right of the Admiral, you see him pull up a data pad. The ship's records do confirm that there was a yellow alert issued, Counselor.
Thank you. It's quite easy to get the details mixed up in the heat of the moment, Commander Krev. I don't hold that against you.
Very kind of you, sir.
Define for me, in your own words, your relationship with Captain Traso.
Our relationship is complicated. Early in his career, I was a mentor. I was his commanding officer. Once he grew out of that phase, he was promoted through the ranks. We lost contact for a time, but still remained friendly. Then when he was finally given the command of the Ragnar, he contacted me and asked me if I was looking for a chief engineer position on a Intrepid. I had never served on an Intrepid before and wanted to get my hands dirty in one of these ships, and decided it would be fun.
And joy and enjoyment are unique parts of being in Starfleet. We're all encouraged to follow our dreams. I can't fault you for that. And the Intrepid class was the first class of Federation starship equipped with the tricyclic warp drive. So I can understand, perhaps from an engineering standpoint, why you might find that to be a unique challenge.
I've attempted to serve at least a single tour on every class of starships in Starfleet. It's a goal of mine, career goal of mine.
Very good, Lieutenant Commander. Tell me, what is Jormungandr?
Jormungandr, in classical Earth Norse mythology, was the world snake. It was the snake that wrapped around the tree of Yggdrasil to hold up the world. But I'm sure you're actually asking me about the entity that we referred to as Jormungandr.
Quite so.
In our travels through the Shackleton Expanse, as has been reported on in multiple logs by myself, the captain, and every other member of the Ragnar, we lost our warp core trying to save ourselves from a black hole. In the midst of this, we encountered a energy being that looked rather like a mythological Earth dragon that merged itself with the ship and replaced our warp drive for a period of time. I befriended this creature, and it served the ship with distinction for a period of time.
And where is this creature now?
It departed.
Departed. As in simply left or disappeared or shuffled off this mortal coil?
It left. I believe it felt that it had done for us all that it could. When it left a warp core, though, I'm not entirely sure how that got there.
So it replaced the warp core. Quite fortuitous.
There were a lot
And-
of temporal shenanigans going on.
Well, fortunately for me, Lieutenant Commander, any temporal shenanigans, as you so aptly put it, is beyond my purview when it does not directly relate to recent events. Those are somebody else's job to sort out.
A couple laughs here and there.
After this refit, the warp core of the Ragnar took on a rather distinct appearance in the intermix chamber. Can you define the nature of that change?
Yes. While the entity was powering the ship, the intermix and the magnetic coils took on a purplish hue, and there was a swirling dragon in them.
And with this most recent refit, you've emulated that to an astonishing degree.
I
By design, perhaps as a remembrance for a comrade.
As a tribute to my friend, yes. I don't see why a performance upgrade should not also have some form factor as well.
It's a little outside established parameters, but I'll grant you that. There's no reason that we can't blend form and function. So, to close, Lieutenant Commander, I'll ask some rather pointed questions. Your refit that the captain was aware of, did you provide all of the details of this refit, or do you have a pre-existing, I suppose, hall pass, if you will, with the captain to tinker with the equipment as you see fit?
I don't have permission to tinker as I see fit. I ask permission to do a thing. He doesn't always ask me what the thing is because he trusts my judgment as an engineer to not put the crew or the ship in jeopardy. If he doesn't agree with my assertion, then he doesn't give me permission to do the thing. as I'm
Very reasonable, very amenable, even. Quite a congenial arrangement. Some would call it congenial, others would call it lax.
they are more than welcome to call it whatever they want. I follow the chain of command. I report to my captain. He chose me for this job. He trusts me to perform that job. I don't get in his way, and most of the time he doesn't get in mine. It's a
Well-
relationship based on trust and on deep familiarity with the workings of each other.
Of course, no one here would dispute that. The record clearly shows that that has been the case. And as I clue up here, Lieutenant Commander, I can only wonder what might have been had the warp engines been functioning. I'm sorry. Strike that from the record.
Thank you.
Speculation, of course, won't get us anywhere. No further questions.
Lieutenant Commander Krev, since it would be strange to cross-examine yourself, you may return to your seat.
I want to see it.
Perhaps I could make a brief statement.
Looks
Sir?
left, looks right. Proceed.
My esteemed opponent has obviously attempted to paint my relationship with the captain, or the captain's oversight of my position, in a way that shows some sort of laxness in discipline. He may not be entirely wrong. But discipline is not everything in the workings of a ship. Some crews are driven by routine and discipline. Others are driven by brilliance and personality. Did Kirk run the most straight-laced of ships in the Federation?
There is an
Would-
audible laugh from the human next to the Andorian. He goes, ha!
Would McCoy have been as good of a doctor? Would Scotty have been able to perform his miracles with a more authoritarian captain? No. Some crews, like say Picard, the good Admiral Picard, he ran a tight ship, and that was his style, and that made him a good captain for his crew. We, and he gestures over to the rest of the senior bridge staff, are not his crew. We are his crew. And he points over at Traso. He ran this ship the way the ship needs to be ran. He saw it. He put together a crew that works together and supports each other for the betterment of the ship and for Starfleet and for the Federation. Style, command style, is not a crime.
The
That's all
Admiral
I have to say.
leans back, and it looks like he's always about to say something, but he simply says, "You may be seated, Lieutenant Commander Krev." Lieutenant Commander Shruth, do you have any further witnesses?
I do, Admiral. I call Commander Ajay to the stand.
Ajay will stand and silently make her way up.
Commander, kindly state for the record your name, rank, and position aboard the USS Ragnar.
Ajay Shahira, Commander. I'm both the first officer and the chief medical officer of the USS Ragnar.
An interesting combination, Commander, to be sure. Do you not think that's a fundamental conflict of interest?
I do not, as I've answered multiple times in other places, sir.
Well, I'm going to need you to answer it one more time in this one. What
Of
is
course.
your primary concern as a doctor?
My primary concern as a doctor is the preservation of life.
Quite so. Quite so. The Federation Physician's Oath is very clear on that you will not knowingly and willfully do harm to another being. However, as the first officer of a ship, it may be necessary to order crew members to their deaths in service of a mission or in service to the greater whole. Is that not so?
It is.
And you would have no ethical issue with that.
Lieutenant Commander, I'm Bajoran. I grew up in the remnants of the occupation. I was taught always that sometimes you don't have a choice, and all you can do is make the best one you can live with. Even doctors know that you can't save everyone. When you triage a disaster, you have to prioritize. Someone will come in who you cannot save, and you cannot waste resources trying to save them when there are dozens of other people who require your expertise who might survive.
Very true. An enviable position, not one that I would wish on you or any doctor, but I appreciate your candor. Can you define for me in your own words your relationship with Captain Traso? How did you come to be his first officer and chief medical officer?
He requested me for the position. We had never worked together before, so I can only assume there was something in my file or that one of the other commanding officers I served under recommended me to his attention.
And have you ever served as first officer of a starship prior to the USS Ragnar?
I have not.
The captain, he is Betazoid, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Betazoids are inherently telepathic. Yet the captain seems to have forsworn this sense. Can you explain to me how this was done? Is there a chemical suppressant to his abilities, or is it merely a choice? if you don't feel qualified
Objection.
to say.
Relevance.
Starfleet Directive 010, Admiral, is the relevance.
Forgive me, Counselor. I'm not completely up to date on every single code. Could you remind me?
The Ragnar was in conflict with, for lack of a better term, this Maw planet. Directive 010 states that any and all attempts at communication must be made. Any and all.
Overruled. Proceed.
Sorry, I'm waiting for Brian to let me know because I can't remember if
It's
I
all right.
ever.
It's all right. There's a tense moment of silence as Commander Ajay is like, maybe like chomping, like biting her fingernails or something. Yeah.
It would have been in my medical records. It's a Betazoid technique that you do through meditation
Thank you.
to cut off that part of your
Yep.
senses.
My understanding is that it's a Betazoid technique. A psychic meditation to control that part of their abilities.
I see. I see. And that renders the subject incapable of telepathy. For a time,
It
at
is.
least.
It is supposed to, is my understanding, yes.
The last neural scan of the captain that you performed during his last physical had the years or however long he's been abstaining from telepathy. Did that cause any change in his
Objection.
brain chemistry?
The Admiral motions over to Lieutenant Commander Krev.
It is my understanding that it is not a how did you state so-called abstention? It is my understanding that once this choice is made, it is more or less irrevocable. Is that not correct?
Commander Ajay, is this meditation or procedure, is this irrevocable? Or is it... Can it be undone? Captain Traso, can it be undone?
He's typing, hang on.
Excuse me, sorry.
The captain cannot undo it himself.
Your objection is sustained. Lieutenant Commander Krev, please rephrase the question.
The effects of the meditation are a total cessation of all telepathic activity.
Yes.
Is the captain's prefrontal cortex still intact? Has it atrophied?
It has not.
Are you familiar, Commander, with the Betazoid neurotransmitter psilocybin?
I've not treated many betazoids, so I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that particular neurotransmitter off the top of my head.
It is a key component to most telepathic species' brain chemistry. Something lacking in humans, Andorians, Bajorans, that renders us incapable of processing telepathic thought. It has been known to enhance or restore telepathic ability when injected by a physician. Was that alternative ever explored?
Given the circumstances at the time, no, it was not.
Of course, because of your inherent unfamiliarity with Betazoid anatomy, correct?
And the fact that I was currently trapped in the medical bay with a hostile entity, yes.
Trapped in the medical bay with a hostile entity. I assume the counterpart to Ensign Zed's assailant.
Yes, the other member of the Tokal delegation.
Understood. And you were physically unable to get out of your own sickbay.
The security officer with me had been shot, and I was being held at rifle point while several of the happenings on the bridge were going on. I believe from reviewing the logs that I had been able to take out my assailant by the time of the temporal incident, given her shift to being a child.
That would be the time to do it.
However, I understand that everything was happening very quickly at that point, and there was no communication restored.
No communication restored on board the ship.
From sickbay, it was sealed. I've later found out it was sealed off because of the Takal's presence there, much as the holodeck was sealed off because of the other ambassador's presence there.
And how was it sealed and by whom?
I believe it was the captain's order after we found out what had happened, what was going on.
So the captain made the decision to trap both his first officer and chief of security in confined areas with hostile aliens.
Given the circumstances present, that's certainly a way to state it.
Let me state it in a different way. What is the crew complement of the USS Ragnar?
An Intrepid class ship
It's a
has,
little over like 200.
I believe there are 212 officers currently on board.
212 Starfleet personnel. 212.
Is there more, Brian? Did I fuck it up?
I thought it was like 100 and...
There's only 150 Starfleet personnel, but there
Thank you.
are probably 212 people
Okay, that's
if
what
we
it was.
count like family and stuff.
Yeah, 212
So-
people. Yeah, okay.
Excellent. All right. So, I apologize, Commander, to get back to business. The captain's response was to seal them in place, contain the threat. The isolation of two of the most critical officers in a crisis is purely coincidental.
The two of us had been assigned to deal with the original welcoming committee to the Takal.
So, I'm sorry, the captain was not taking the lead in a first contact.
This wasn't technically a first contact. We had had some communications with them before arriving at what turned out to be a planet-eating spaceship. There was not much communication, perhaps, but the captain was present and in charge of that much. And as this is my first time as a first officer, as you noted earlier, he permitted me to take the lead on this so I could get some more experience in that matter.
I understand. So your involvement in this first contact as mission lead was by your own request, then?
It was.
I understand, a request that was granted by the captain. Quite so.
And
I have
the
no further
choice of
questions.
ensign.
He does an abrupt about face and heads back to his bench.
Ooh. All right. Lieutenant Commander Krev, your witness.
Commander Ajay, the Ragnar performed scans of the planet, population scans of the planet ship entity while we were holding our first contact mission, correct?
Multiple times.
Could you tell me about those population scans?
It was exactly 50% male and 50% female, the first scan. Several scans that took place during the diplomatic meeting, as well as after both Ensign Zed and myself were separated with the two ambassadors. I later found out in reviewing what had taken place while I was in the med bay that the population decreased as the ship took on its true form. By which I mean as it opened up in preparation to eat the Ragnar. I was most curious about that fact, given that it coincided with both of the ambassadors becoming more desperate in their desires to find the location of the Federation. I suspect, given that desperation that Irdu showed, that the planet ate them as it grew hungrier and as they became...
Objection, Admiral. Speculation.
Sustained.
Speculation of a senior medical officer
Speculation nonetheless, Counselor.
interpreting data.
The objection is sustained. Lieutenant Commander Krev, please avoid this line of questioning.
Very well. Thank you, Commander.
Lieutenant Commander.
She goes to sit back down. There's a couple of murmurs. The Cardassian, sitting on the edge to the left of the Admiral, gives Commander Ajay a kind of almost respectful and knowing kind of nod. And just kind of nods his head at her as she gets up and steps down. His expression had remained very stoic during your discussions of the Bajoran occupation, but it was a very respectful kind of nod as you go to sit down. Lieutenant Commander, Truth, any further witnesses?
Only one, Admiral, the most important. I call Captain Traso, I'm sorry.
Captain Traso, you approach, sit in the chair. The room feels cold. Like maybe the thermometer's turned down a little bit. It just feels cold right now.
And I think we just cut it away to while they were on recess, Lieutenant Commander Shruth lowers the ambient temperature by 5 degrees because Andorians prefer the cold.
I like it.
Krev pats him on the back when he gets up.
Very good. It's a very tense session, by the way, Brian. I'm feeling it. I'm nervous. I don't know why I'm nervous. I'm nervous. Ooh. Your witness. Prosecution.
And Commander Shruth approaches the bench slowly. Captain, he just locks eyes on you, still impassive, expressionless almost. And then he gives an almost kindly smile and says, "Sir, if you will, please state your name, rank, position aboard the USS Ragnar for the record."
Asba Traso, Captain of the USS Ragnar.
Captain, you have a very loyal crew. Did you select all of your senior staff yourself?
I did. In fact, I think you'll find the record will show that I selected every member of that crew.
Every member of the crew. That's quite a feat. That must have been quite a lot of personnel files to review.
It was, but it was worth it.
That certainly seems to be the case. Captain, can you tell me where you were on Stardate 408566.3 before the Tokal homeworld revealed itself as a planet-eating starship?
Seated in the captain's chair on my bridge.
The entire time?
Yes.
Very good. And several of your crew members, as we've established, were working on projects, the ship. Of course, as a captain, it's your duty to encourage this, foster this this growth of your officers. When Lieutenant Paris approached you with his idea for the implementation of his prototype modification to the cloaking device, what was your response?
I have generally found that when dealing with people who know more about a subject than I do, that it is in my best interest to allow them some latitude and allow them to explore the boundaries of those subjects without needing to get my approval or feedback on every step. So while I did grant the lieutenant permission to experiment, I was unaware of the full nature of his project until it was revealed to me in the moment.
So, Captain, you were unaware of a major modification to your ship, your command, something that may impact its performance until it was revealed to you in the moment.
That is correct.
Was that the same for Lieutenant Commander Krev's modifications to your warp drive?
Almost exactly the same, except that I was somewhat more familiar with the workings of a warp drive, so I wasn't being as hands-off due to my lack of knowledge. I was being hands-off due to my respect of the chief engineer.
Of course, of course. And had you, in the recent mission logs of the Ragnar, encountered any hostile species while exploring the Shackleton Expanse?
What exactly would you consider the time frame of recent, Lieutenant?
Since the beginning of your mission.
We've only had one hostile encounter, and hostile might be portraying it a bit too dramatically, as I don't believe anyone truly intended any hostility towards us, more that we were beneath their notice.
Ah, I understand. So almost akin to, say, ants having to scuttle away from a foot that's about to come down.
Indeed.
I understand completely. So, all in all, a very peaceful mission.
Had its share of excitement, but
I suppose peaceful in
overall,
the martial sense.
yes, of course.
Very good, very good. So, you would say that the atmosphere on the ship was relaxed.
I would.
And Captain, tell me about the creature. Give me your observations.
I assume you were referring to the large planet-sized?
Yes, quite so.
When we originally approached, we mistook it for simply a planet. The planet from which the 2 ambassadors which joined our ships originated from. Scans indicated that they had a extremely large population, as is typical of a warp-capable civilization. And it was only after the ambassadors were aboard and well entrenched in their first contact celebration, for lack of a better term, or procedure, that a maw opened up and attempted to draw the ship inside.
And this thing was able to propel itself through space.
While we saw no evidence of that at the time, their scans did reveal that the surface of the planet, upon closer inspection, was formed of many different biomes and origins, such that we were able to conclude from our scans that the planet's surface was composed of many different planets that had been accumulated through the supposed ship's passage through space. We made some attempts to communicate with the ship now, but received no answer.
Of course, of course. Lieutenant Paris earlier described, I think it was Lieutenant Paris, although I'm not entirely sure, GM, it may have been Zed or Paris. One of them described the survivors of the planet that were evacuated as children. Its children.
Mhm.
Captain, how is it that these survivors came to be referred to as this world's children?
In the final moments, as I broadcast a general warning that I was about to destroy the ship, suddenly a voice we had not heard before responded, asking us to take care of its children.
So it did communicate.
In its last moments, it absolutely did.
In its last moments, a final plea to safeguard the lives of its young. It's really rather heartwarming when you think about it.
No, if you ignore the fact that this was a planet that had consumed other planets, absolutely.
Captain Traso, there are many species in the universe that behave thusly. Earth's whale shark swims through the seas, devouring countless plankton, shrimp, krill.
Objection. This planet was trying to eat Federation planets, not krill, Lieutenant Commander.
Admiral, I'd ask that the counsel for the defense address the bench when objecting, not the prosecution.
Lieutenant Commander Karev, please clarify your objection.
My objection is that he is drawing false comparisons.
Well, all right, then let's draw a more apt comparison. In the 2360s, the Federation Starship Enterprise, on 2 occasions, encountered something referred to in their ship's logs as the crystalline entity. A spaceborne life form that traveled the stars, devouring all life on any planet that passed its flight path. Omicron Theta, a Federation colony, was destroyed by this organism. A nascent Federation colony on a different world was likewise destroyed with comparable amounts of loss of life. The crew of the USS Enterprise, when faced with this horror, were determined to communicate with this creature in some way to create understanding. As Ensign Zed so aptly put it, enemies can become allies and friends through understanding. It is not in dispute that this creature was sapient with its plea for protection of its children. Captain Traso, did you do everything in your power to avoid this result.
No.
Why?
Because the entity had already proven that despite our attempts to communicate, it had no compassion for us and only offered to communicate when it was on the receiving end of the aggression. There was no guarantee that that planet would not resume its previous size and go forth and consume planets containing life forms that I felt warranted the benefit of protection. As the great Spock once said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And in that instant, I made a judgment call that this was our opportunity to ensure that this entity, as you call it, would not be able to inflict itself upon the many worlds of the Federation.
Quite so. We've faced threats similar to that before, and sometimes drastic actions have to be taken. In this instance, though, you made a decision, a military decision to protect your ship and crew.
Mhm.
But Captain, you are a Starfleet officer. We do not place others at risk or even potentially at risk to save ourselves. Sometimes that means that we lose the battle, and sometimes that means that we lose our lives.
Is there a question in there, Counselor, or are you just pontificating at the court's expense?
My question is, why did you destroy a life form unlike anything that we have ever encountered before without doing everything in your power to prevent that outcome?
Because in the moment, I had an unknown amount of time to make this decision.
Because you had no warp drive.
Indeed. And through an unforeseen circumstance, we suddenly had an advantage that hadn't been present before.
The Mr. Paris's cloaking device.
Indeed. I issued a full broadcast transmission, which suddenly was receiving a response, telling them that they needed to evacuate their ship. And it was only upon the beginning of that evacuation that we received any communication. I find it highly speculative that that would result in a conclusion that we had killed an entity. It could just as well have been an AI, a VI. There's no confirmation in the debris that we brought aboard the Ragnar that the ship itself was sentient.
No,
However,
there isn't, Captain, because you didn't try.
and if it so happens that the rest of the Federation sleeps easier tonight, then I would make that decision in that moment exactly the same way again.
Ah, yes. Yes, yes. Clarion call of the accused.
Objection.
Withdrawn.
Saint.
I have no further questions for you, Captain.
There's a murmur that flows through the courtroom. You see the bench, everyone on the bench talking to each other. Only the Cardassian doesn't lean in and talk with the Admiral. The human and the Andorian are both leaning in, and the Admiral seems to kind of trying to wave them off. But Lieutenant Commander Krev, your witness.
Captain Traso, what do you know of the Enterprise D's encounters with the crystalline entity?
I'm aware that the crystalline entity existed and that it was destroyed due to some action of the Enterprise D, but the specifics elude me.
If the court will allow, I do have some a bit of background behind that incident that would change its that would prove it to be a ill-fitting comparison.
The
If I may.
Cardassian speaks up. Admiral, I would like to hear this comparison. The Admiral looks to the Cardassian. You may proceed, Lieutenant Commander Krev. I think it is relevant to our discussion here today.
Thank you, sirs. The crystalline entity was being pursued by the Enterprise. It had destroyed several planets by essentially wiping all life off of their surfaces and eating said life, essentially. The Enterprise spent several weeks pursuing the crystalline entity, studying it from afar as part of their mission. And they were also assigned one of the foremost expert in the Federation on the crystalline entity. They knew what it was. They knew where it was. They knew how it operated, and they were safe and removed from the entity. Captain Picard attempted communications with it, but the expert had talked, I believe it was Commander Data and Lieutenant Commander LaForge, or I'm sorry, Lieutenant Commander Data and Lieutenant LaForge at the time, into creating a graviton beam, which she actually used to destroy the entity instead of communicate with it. The destruction of the entity was done maliciously by the expert because her family had been killed by the entity on one of the planets that it had destroyed. There was no sense of urgency by the captain to protect the Enterprise from his ship. He was not being threatened immediately, and the entity was not actively searching for other planets, specifically heavily populated Federation planets, to attack. None of these relate to the decisions that Captain Traso had to make. He knew nothing about the threat other than it had destroyed many other planets and that it was actively searching for the Federation to attack. It was actively trying to literally eat the ship that he was on. And there were agents aboard his ship that were attacking his crew members.
Your statement is noted, Lieutenant Commander Krev, and appreciated. Do you have any questions for the witness?
Do you wish to say anything else in your defense, Captain Traso?
I appreciate the opportunity, but I believe I have answered the appropriate questions.
You may
I
take
do as well.
You may take your
Thank
seat,
you, sir.
gentlemen. There is a few moments, some murmuring, as is tradition. We see the bench, you see the Admiral whispering, having some quiet conversations between those around him. And the Admiral glances over and says, "Gentlemen, closing statements. Prosecution, you will go first. Defense, you will have the final remarks. Proceed."
I think it's been established that the events that took place were not done with malicious intent. That said, the events that occurred and transpired are a direct result of Captain Traso's lax command style. Having handpicked his entire senior staff and every member of his crew, appointing them to a position of prestige would have engendered loyalty and perhaps overabundance of willingness to obey his orders. The record will show Ensign Zed stating, "I would never question the captain," and Lieutenant Paris saying he owed the officer that he was to Captain Traso directly. Captain Traso served under his chief engineer as a young officer, and now in his captaincy returned the favor by appointing him as chief engineer. Not malicious in intent, but grievous in consequence for something that had the wherewithal to plead for the lives of its children, as it was neutralized by a weaponized cloaking device, all on Captain Traso's order. The grievous threat aboard the Ragnar, 2 hostile aliens against a crew of 150, precipitated the chief of security and the first officer, 2 officers who could potentially have given alternatives to the captain's course of action. They were isolated. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but these facts cannot be disputed. It is and has been my intention to show that, while not intentionally, the captain did objectively isolate himself from courses of action based on his own actions and omission of action. I've made this case to the best of my ability. It is not one that I take lightly. It is not one that I enjoy. But it is one that is necessary. Prosecution rests.
Admiral simply turns to Lieutenant Commander Krev and motions at him.
Rev stands up, kind of rubs his trotters together. The prosecution would have you believe that a commander, a captain, trusting his crew and putting faith in their abilities to carry out their duties is some sort of dereliction of duty. He insinuates that loyalty and recognition of excellence is some sort of quid pro quo for the shirking of responsibilities and of is a shirking of responsibilities and a willingness to dance over regulations that somehow having friendly relations with the members of your crew makes you a bad captain. He insinuates that giving your subordinates responsibilities to usher and handle diplomats in a first contact situation is somehow negligent. Remember, these aliens that were aboard our ship, they were ambassadors. Somehow sending your first officer and your chief of security to see over the ambassadors on your ship is a negligent action, because the first officer and the chief of security weren't by his side to give him opposing views. Well, obviously they weren't. They were off doing their duty to the Federation and to the ship and to their captain. These were officers that were trusted to do their jobs and were out aboard the ship doing their jobs. Anything else is in stating anything else is quite honestly an insult to these fine officers and their commitment to their duties to Starfleet. Asba Traso made a choice. In the moment, he did not sit there and think, wow, maybe I should ignore all of my telepathic abilities that I could be using right now that I gave up, 30 years ago, Captain? To communicate with this thing that's trying to literally eat my ship and then go and eat eat the planets of my Federation. No. He saw a threat. The threat that had spent what was the number?
It was 22,000 different biomes that you registered.
20 that had stolen and eaten 22,000 biomes. That's who knows how many planets that is. Who knows how many civilizations that is. Given more time, given different circumstances, would he have made a different choice? Yes, we all would. But in the time and given the circumstances, he made the best choice that he could. He made the only choice that he could. And he did it as a Starfleet captain in the finest traditions of the service. The defense rests.
And as Lieutenant Commander Krev returns to his seat, the murmurs in the courtroom, there's just a little bit of murmuring, quiet murmuring, just like murmur. And the Admiral looks to his left, the Cardassian next to him, looks to his right, the other two. We'll take a short recess, and then I will return and give my verdict. It's up, exits out, and I want to have one final moment with the crew and the captain prior to the verdict being given. Just one final moment with all of you. Gather around, say your goodbye. I mean, say hellos or whatever. I'm just kidding. We'll see what happens. They're gonna go into deliberation. So, but you guys have a moment. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say to the captain?
Krev looks over next to him and says, "Well, Cap, we did the best we could."
Sure did. And I can't think of anybody I'd rather have done my best with than you. You put the sand out to shake.
Shakes. It's been real. It's been an honor, sir. God, I hope these admirals can get their heads out of their asses.
I mean, we should stop saying stuff like that. That's really what gets us into trouble, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, so do I. So.
Yeah.
It's been a long road.
Anyone else?
Traso will stand up and walk over to you can see the rest of the crew just sitting there. Like,
Yeah.
listen, in case I do not get a chance to tell you, I am very proud of all of you. I can't think of anyone else I would rather have had as my command crew. And if God's forbid, the four deities forbid, you end up with another captain, although it should be Ajay. If you end up with another captain, he'll be lucky to have you.
It's flattering you think that, sir, but we're rooting for you, and not for the reasons the prosecution said.
Well, you don't feel like you all owe me favors? Damn.
Sorry to burst your bubble there, Captain.
Well, here I was thinking that was the reason I was going to win the what's the squares game?
Parisi squares.
That's the one.
Parisi squares.
Thank you.
Captain, like there's always option 3. Remember,
Yeah, I've still got the
option 3.
comm badge attached.
Well, that's option 2, but option 3. Like I know how
does-
to reverse.
Does the Crockett
time
have a lock?
now.
Oh no! What? No.
God, I'm glad the admiral didn't overhear that one. Oh,
Yeah.
yikes!
Like it was done like clearly like a joke, but like he's also like half serious.
Well, Zed.
Oh yeah, Go ahead, Zed.
Oh, I was just saying, Zed the whole time has just been quiet, kind of stepped back a little bit. He just keeps looking at the captain, and his eyes are almost kind of teary with
Zed,
worry. And then he just kind of comes up and gives the captain a hug.
Oh, Zed is the heart. Zed is
So
the heart.
Traso has to do that awkward, like his arms are pinned to his side hug. Like, yeah, okay, then, yep.
And then Zed just kind of,
Stop.
kind of,
I-
he goes, he says back, yeah.
As you all have a moment together, you watch as the admirals step back in. Well, the admiral and his folks step back in. All rise. May be seated. Captain Traso, please stand. We began today in an effort to find the truth. The truth of whether or not, Captain Traso, your actions were justified or not. I'd like to first and foremost compliment both the prosecution as well as the defense in providing their doing the best of jobs. I'm supposed to be objective in this situation. But as a human, perhaps a failure of being a human, I find myself thinking, what would I have done were I in your position, Captain Traso? I wonder, would I have destroyed what I perceived as a pure and undescribable threat to both my crew and the very planets that I call home and family? I wonder if I would have done the same thing, and to be honest, I can't say that I would have not. But regardless of whether or not I would have performed this action the same way you did, does not necessarily justify it. At its core, Captain Traso, it has been shown that you did not, be it through negligence or emotion, you did not do everything in your power to find a diplomatic solution with a potentially, and as the prosecution put it, we will never know if it was intelligent, living, or not because it has been destroyed. With that all being said, I feel that removing you from command would do more harm to this crew than if I was to leave you in charge of it. We find Captain Traso not guilty. However, Captain Traso, a demerit will be placed on your permanent record, and you will spend the next 6 months in a maximum security Federation prison to think about what you've done. During that time, Commander Ajay shall maintain and be in command of the Ragnar, after which you shall resume command, but be reporting directly to me moving forward. You are all dismissed. Bang, bang on his gravel. He gets up. He walks out with everybody. And we have a moment. What is the expression on Lieutenant Commander Truth's face as this happens?
As the Admiralty Board had come back out, his sort of impassive, expressionless features, for anybody paying attention, would suddenly become very fatigued. And as that mask slips, it becomes apparent to everybody that he does not want to be doing what he's doing. But has a job to do and will do it to the best of his abilities. And there is an expression of pronounced relief as he hears the sentence, almost as though like he's sort of hunched and slumped as he's waiting, and it's almost like you can almost see a weight come off of his shoulders as he straightens up and makes no gesture and no immediate demand for an appeal.
How about Captain Trace and Lieutenant Commander Krev and the rest of the crew?
Traso just, as soon as they say not guilty, Traso slaps, like just pats Krev on the back. And then he finds that he's going to prison for a bit, and he's like, well, it's a vacation.
Yeah. Krev smiles and then stops smiling. We'll say that.
What about Paris, Commander Ajay, and Ensign Zed?
Paris did the whole fist pump at the and then just like, God damn it.
Zed has a look of shock, and he turns to Commander Ajay and Paris. He's like, prison? I don't see how this is appropriate punishment.
Ajay's kind of like crumpled into herself in relief.
They said they did not hold him. I just do not see why the prison sentence is necessary.
They have to do something, Zed. Because of the Federation and Starfleet's mandate.
Well,
They
I
feel a
hope-
demerit isn't a strong enough statement because of the actions taken.
Peering at the doorway that is where everyone else can enter, not the judges' seats, appears Admiral Anton. And he not marches, but he walks over, shakes a few hands on his way, he walks over. Captain Traso, may I speak with you for a moment?
Certainly, Admiral.
And he pulls Captain Traso aside just for a moment. Captain Traso, I know we have not worked too closely together, but moving forward we will be somewhat inseparable. The rest of the council, including myself, wanted to see you expelled from Starfleet. It was my left-hand Cardassian that convinced me otherwise. I want to be very clear. This is your one. I will be watching you like a hawk. Should you make a mistake moving forward, it will be your last mistake as a Starfleet captain. Is that understood?
Yes, sir.
Think of prison like a vacation. At least that's what I would do in your seat and shoes. Pats you on the shoulder, gets up, walks out, leaving the captain alone with the rest of his crew.
Before he rejoins the rest of the crew, the captain's going to walk over to the prosecution table. And
Captain.
Lieutenant Commander, I wanted to tell you did an excellent job. You genuinely did make me see things from a perspective that I had perhaps not considered.
I only wish my orders weren't to push for discharge, sir.
Well, if you ever find yourself dissatisfied with your JAG duties and thinking about taking a berth on a ship, give me a jingle. I could stand to have a JAG officer who owes me a favor. And we winks.
And he gives a genuine smile to that and says, "Well, sir, if you must know, I've never served on a starship before."
There's no shame in that. I'll tell you, it's exciting. I mean, scary as hell, but exciting most of the time.
Something tells me the Ragnar may be a little too chaotic for me.
And I
It's up
think
to you.
that is a great moment as we pan out the window of the courtroom, and we pan back, and then we roll credits on the end of season 2 of Star Trek Valhalla. And I just want to say special thank you to Aaron for playing the JAG officer. I thought you did an absolutely fantastic job.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Man, it was tough. It was really tough. It was really
I
tough.
wanted to punch you so many times.
Having been in Captain Traso's seat with Aaron being the prosecution, I knew he was going to do a bang-up job. So it was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. There were a couple of key moments, and I really tried to be objective, but there were a couple of key moments that really stood out to me that really helped me make my decision. I tried to be neutral in this. In my heart of hearts, I didn't want Captain Traso to be expelled from Starfleet, I'll be honest with you. But I listened to the evidence, I listened to the crew's statements, and it really came down to, yeah, he did what he thought was best at the time. So, wow. Thank you so much for the 5 gift subs, dude. That's fucking amazing, Chewbacca. Damn, dude. That is super great. So
Yay, season 1.
Woohoo!
Or season 2.
Season 2,
Or
actually.
season 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo!
So, to our viewers, just want to say thank you so much for hanging out and watching. We had some new people, some new subs today. Some folks sticking with us. So I really appreciate it. You will see the crew of the Ragnar return for season 3 in roughly a month. I'm going to be doing a Stars Without Number short adventure to kind of give us just a bit of a palate cleanser, and I want to try a brief new system. I'm going to give the crew of the Ragnar just a little break, and they will be coming back. It will be roughly a year after the events. The captain will have had his prison time served, relaxing, working in gardens, doing whatnot, thinking about what he's done, as it were. And then we will pick back up at the beginning, and a quick little foreshadow that Federation Klingon War that I mentioned might be kicking off. So we'll see how the crew of the Ragnar will be involved in that. But as I always say at the end of every session, and I suppose every season, any final thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns from anyone present here before we wrap up today's session and episode?
No, that was great.
Yeah, tons of fun. And
Yeah,
thank
good.
you very much, Aaron, for doing
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Aaron,
Yeah.
I hate you now. It's over.
Absolutely.
I can never hate you.
It's
So
my,
that-
it's my cross to bear.
Absolutely.
I could never hate you.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, as I always say at the end of every session as well, thank you so fucking much to the players for playing. Without you, none of this is possible. Thank you so much to the viewers for viewing. Without you, no one watches us, and it's more fun when people do. Happy gaming, and good night, everybody. We'll see you next time. Cheers.